Hi and welcome to the weekly predictions. This week we will talk about predictions for the week of August 12th, 2019. These are based on astrology and astrological transits primarily. So let's quickly recap predictions for the previous week and which ones maybe have or haven't come true. For the markets, my predictions for market was that the market will go up, and it actually went down. There was a fairly large drop. And let's see, because of the intensification of the US and China trade, so that was definitely quite off. On Tuesday, I thought the market was going to go up, and it did. Wednesday, I thought that the market would go down, and the results sort of were mixed, and depending on the index you would look at. Thursday, I thought the market would go up, and it did. Friday, again, I was wrong. I thought the market would continue to go up on Friday, and it actually went down. I did make predictions specifically for gold that it would be going up more or less the entire week, which it did. There were quite a few large, I guess, periods of the rallies, I guess, in gold, especially last Monday and Wednesday, and it went up several percent. There was also an interesting piece of news specifically about gold, where I guess, I'm not sure how that happened, but I guess there was a Mexican mint had left their door open, and so some thieves were able to steal 2.5 million, I'm not sure if it's US dollars, but some sort of dollars or, yeah, worth of gold coins. So let's see. For the ongoing manifestations of the ongoing transits for the Saturn and Pluto conjunction in Capricorn that we would expect would be death of old leaders or changes in sort of the old guards, people who are in power or have been in power for a long time, no longer are in power, whether they step down, they pass away, peacefully, or they are removed, potentially violently or through some sort of even, terror, violence, etc. So we had some news along those lines. We obviously had this news about the Jeffrey Epstein committing suicide in federal prison. And what's interesting about that, again, is that I guess the sort of accusations that he was accused of had to do with some, I guess, slavery, sexual slavery, or perversions, etc. So basically a lot of these, and of course some ties to some political leaders. So a lot of that actually, again, is a nice example of the manifestations of Pluto and Saturn, because Pluto has to do with like sex and also hidden things, kind of dirty hidden things, or death even, threats, etc. And Saturn has to do with, again, things that are going on for a long time. They're established, potentially related to large corporations and or governments, and things, again, that, like I said, are kind of go on for a long time. So, and that would definitely fit, an example of somebody who is, again, in power for a long time through maybe doing some things that are not necessarily very savory, and then they pass away. Pluto has to do with violent death usually, and Saturn is sort of the end of life or the end of some sort of cycle. Then we had news also about the former Kyrgyz president being detained after several raids at his mansion. Also, I didn't see it at the time, so it's not really news for last week, but I have seen that as of July 9th of this year, Ross Perot had died also, yet another sort of manifestation of example of somebody who's really old, somebody who was in power, really strong, powerful leader in power for a long time, of an old age, and passing away. So we had quite a few such leaders either being removed or passing away this year, and this will continue in 2020. Another manifestation of this Pluto being also having to do with things like nuclear power, nuclear accidents, really recycling, etc. And of course Saturn having to do with things that have to do with rocks, mountains, peaks of sorts. That other expectations for this week, again, there's an ongoing expectation for the entire 2019 and 2020, were increase in volcanic activity, earthquakes, as well as sort of geopolitical changes and accidents and or some sort of changes that have to do with, again, nuclear fuel, nuclear power, etc. So we had several news along those lines. So we had a controlled demolition of the old power plant nuclear power plant, specifically in Germany. And again, this was controlled, which Saturn actually is supportive of things that are done in a controlled way, and that's been planned and done without rush. So that seems to have proceeded well. The plant has been actually decommissioned all the way back in 1988 and demolished only this week. But again, because things were taking their own sweet time, so to speak, it seems to have gone perfectly fine. At the same time, in Russia, there was news from Russia about another accident that killed 5 nuclear experts that were working on sort of experimental isotope and liquid propellant engine. And I guess the facility was near water, which again involves this other ongoing aspect we have right now, transit rather, between Neptune and Jupiter, in Neptune being in the water sign of Pisces. So I'm not sure if these are just kind of events that are maybe building up to a bigger, larger, even more serious events that involve nuclear plants or nuclear fuel power, or something that's been discarded that is radiating, basically something, you know, like discarded, you know, used fuel for nuclear power plants. Something that might be bigger coming up in, say, September of 2019 and January of 2020, and or maybe something like this accident in Russia. I guess it's the second sort of event. Previously there was, I think, 1 or 2 or 3 people have been killed or injured working on something, I guess, at the same facility. So I'm not sure if it's basically something that's being hidden there and the accident is bigger than we're being let on, or these may be precursors, sort of like pre-shocks, you know, before a major earthquake hits, and something is still around the corner. We will experience it in September, or, you know, next peak would be through early October, and next peak would be January of 2020. So the areas that have been sort of experiencing some of these events right now, maybe again the ones that maybe may experience more severe sort of developments in September and then January. As far as the ongoing transits between Neptune and Jupiter, as I said, those would have to do with things like oil, navy, anything that occurs over water, maybe pharmaceuticals, also chemicals, things that are that involve deception, or some things that are confusing, unclear, and or religious places, places of worship, long distance transportation, immigration, judges, laws, international relations, as I said, etc. So we had obviously a lot of that going on. Oh yeah, and by the way, for the geopolitical tensions, I forgot to say, of course, we have ongoing tensions in Hong Kong. We have tensions intensifying between India and Pakistan, as well as US and China, of course. So for the Neptune-Jupiter, oil, you know, water, etc., we had quite a few news about various floods all over the world, including in India, floods and landslides. We have $46 million in damages in Vietnam from flooding, which is apparently the most serious loss in recent years. I guess as of July, I saw news that there were, again, record number of rivers flooding in China. We have now, this last week, there's Typhoon Lakima, I believe it's was pronounced, blasted eastern China with several dozen people dead. There was also explosion in Tanzania, that killed 60 people who were trying to siphon some fuel off of a truck. So again, oil has to do with Neptune and or Jupiter. Mostly I'll look at it at Neptune, but I've seen some astrologers also look at Jupiter to predict things that have to do with oil. And I haven't seen news about too many super strong earthquakes. There are some 5+ earthquakes, but nothing super strong. But again, this is something that is still coming up, though. The manifestation of these aspects the transits will continue on, and like I said, for the next peak I would look at this fall, you know, September, early October, and then especially January of 2020 for like really massive earthquakes. However, we did have news about a volcano, Mount Asama volcano in Japan had erupted last week. Let's see. So other specific news for last week that I had, or other predictions that I had, were that there would be pretty much all week increase in international sort of news about our international relations agreements, as well as about individuals who are diplomats, judges, and or somehow work with, on projects that involve immigration or long distance travel, and that there may be increased news about appointments of new leaders who again are judges, lawyers, diplomats, or handle international trade in some sort. I haven't necessarily seen news about appointments of new leaders, but there were news about some of these leaders in such roles who passed away, or not passed away. One of them passed away. That was former Indian External Affairs Minister. And also there was news on the same day, August 6th, that U.S. ambassador to Russia had resigned. So let's see, specifically for August 6th last week, I made prediction that there would be continued news about the hot weather, as well as rising military tensions, fighting, explosions, fires, shooting, various accidents, especially the ones that involve something overheating, exploding, like fires, etc. Protests will be ongoing. And indeed, we had some interesting news. There was some news, not on the 6th itself, and on the 7th, there was news about some cancellations and delays by, I guess, British Airways, that because there was some IT system failure. Again, I'm not sure how much that had to do with, let's say, something overheating, but it was, I guess, some sort of an accident, something unpredictable event, and thousands of passengers were stranded. More sort of closely related to specifically explosions, there was news on August 9th that again 12 people were injured in a new, I guess, more recent explosion in the Siberian ammunition depot. And again, the same day, at the 9th in Russia, there was another news about some accident, like I already mentioned, that where 5 nuclear researchers or experts were killed. Again, there was an explosion. Similarly, on the 10th, there was also news about, from Norway, that there was a shooting at the Oslo Mosque, which again, places of worship have to do with this ongoing sort of Neptune, Jupiter square, so religion and or immigration, all those issues are kind of more highlighted, or things occur over oil or because of flooding, or occur over water, or involve, too much water, something like that, water that cannot be contained because of a problem or causes the problem. So let's see, and of course on the 9th of, I believe it was on the 9th of August, I believe it was, there were major power outages in London, as well as in parts of England and Wales, and interestingly enough, the reasons that were pointed out as in subsequent investigation were that there were 2 power stations that failed, and one of them was, was gas-fired, and the other one actually was an offshore gas station, like a wind power station, but it actually is positioned over water. Let's see. And more news about the fires. We had some news, this was not on the 6th of August as I predicted, but more so on August 11th and 12th, about some large wildfires starting in Greece and Gran Canary Island in Spain. So a few days off, but again, we still have a lot of planets in Leo, and the harmonious aspect to Jupiter in another fire sign of Sagittarius. So there's a lot of fire energy, and the fire energy is kind of fueling sort of itself. So there's a sort of free open path for it to continue intensifying, and that was the case last week, and it will continue to be into this week, the week of August 12th. So now moving on to the predictions for the August 12th week. Like I said, ongoing influence of Neptune and Jupiter, so increase of focus on all things to do with oil, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, navy, things happening over water, like literally in the water, over water, on top of water, with the ships traveling over water, as well as immigration, as well as anything to do with international relations, negotiations, and so forth. So those things may be affected where things may not necessarily be going very smoothly, maybe excess of either, Like I said, too many people are flooding in certain areas, and it's kind of hard to sort things out, and or travel is affected, long distance travel especially, and especially if something has to do over water, even if it's flight over water, and or literally like there's some typhoons or some hurricanes or something that again involves problems with basically water or flooding, etc. And now that I think about it, another manifestation, I guess ongoing manifestation of this Saturn conjuncting Pluto would also, as far as weather is concerned, would give a propensity to sort of colder than usual temperatures, again, especially when those planets are kind of coming closer together. So for in the parts, of course, of the world where we are expecting it to be winter, of course, you would not see it necessarily in places where it would be a summertime. But I have seen news that in Australia they had an unseasonably, unusually cold weather. And I do predict, especially because of these planets kind of coming even closer together, that in winter of 2020, especially in January, there may be really severe, like either snowstorms or ice storms, or really like bouts of really, really cold weather, more kind of colder than usual. So that was a little side note there. So continuing, another prediction that I had ongoing for several weeks, and I have been writing it all on my blog at lastunka.com. So basically for it is significant for this week, where we have Jupiter planet, has to do with like laws, legal, I guess, activities or laws, judges, diplomats, international relations or immigration, long distance transportation, etc. It's turning direct this week. So if there were some negotiations or agreements or trips that were being made prior to this week, the direction of those activities may change. So maybe something was, there was a build up towards a particular direction in negotiations that may turn around, or if there was a legal decision made on, for example, flights or travel to a particular area, it may potentially be again blocked, or vice versa. If it was blocked previously, it may reopen. Or if there was an agreement made between some international entities, it may potentially be reversed or revised. Continuing focus on gold this week, with again increased news about gold and potential increased value of gold, and with the caveat that I predicted that the 12th and or 13th may experience fairly strong moves in gold, and I thought, and I still think that there may be a strong drop. Right now is actually, I'm recording this on the 12th evening, so I know that there was no drop on the 12th. Again, I thought the 12th would be like in the morning or maybe daytime that the gold will peak, but it will start falling down as of the afternoon or late afternoon on the 12th and or 13th. So we will see what happens on the 13th. I still think that 13th may see a fairly large drop. And another strong day for sort of to look out for moves in gold prices will be the 15th. I'm not sure exactly of the direction, but it may be a reversal from the day before. And like I said, either way, it will likely be a strong day as far as strong moves in the markets, and particularly in gold and potentially also silver. So 12th, 13th, and 15th, the strongest for gold and or silver. Ongoing influence in the world that may see, increased in potentially, like I said, earthquake, mudslides, collapses of the old buildings, death or changes in sort of power of the old leaders, geopolitical changes. All of those are ongoing and will continue through next year. Let's see, then we have also an ongoing prediction for China, and that is again increased probability of earthquakes, mudslides, some significant disasters, and increased developments that have to do with oil, navy, pharmaceuticals, pollution, secrets, and some sort of deceptive activities, as well as international agreements and long-distance transportation. This week, the strongest dates for that influence are the 12th and the 13th of August. So as far as the market direction, I pretty much predicted a down moves for every day of the week. For Monday, the probability I said was going to be about 60-65%. As of now, we know the Monday was a down day. For For the US, 12th, 13th may see increased focus on like retail sales, social media, communication, transportation businesses, as well as rates, taxes, tariffs, loans, debt, insurance, etc. So there may be some either upsets or attacks, maybe even shootings or protests, fires, such as engine or some battery catches fire, increased disagreements or arguments over these topics, such as over cuts or rates, and or the businesses in these areas, such as retail sales, like I said, social media, communication, transportation businesses may experience some pressure where they will be asked to make some active changes to enhance their security or to improve compliance with certain laws, like they may be accused of violating some legal statute or something like that. And or it may have to do with security, so they will be forced, or they'll feel like some protests against them, or they'll feel some pressure maybe from regulators to comply there, because again we recently had some shootings, some news about the shootings, mass shootings in the US, so unfortunately the probability is also high for the 12th, 13th for such events, and or maybe protests against, for example, retailers who are selling guns, or protests because of some gun laws or something like that. And the places where that may occur the most would be, of course, unsurprisingly, courts, as well as retail locations like stores, as well as transportation hubs, or any places that have to do with communication, media, and education. For China, the 12th and 13th are also very significant. There may be increased focus on the news on earnings and profits, banks, savings, accumulated capital, banks' assets, and real estate. So there, in those areas, there may be questions on whether or not some of these sort of assets or banks' savings are really kind of as high as they are, or they may be, what they're reporting may be at odds with some expectations, and or the value of some assets such as real estate maybe appears to be overblown, or somebody's paying too much for something that's really not worth it, or so there is some expense that is maybe higher than it should be, such as banks maybe investing in something such as real estate, or acquire some assets that end up being not worth the price, so they're paying right now a lot, but then the value quickly goes down. For Tuesday, probability of market going down is about 65%. There may be increased focus on again, retail sales, social media, contracts, agreements, as well as communication, transportation, businesses, and that's like globally. There may be some minor disruptions in the afternoon New York time, including power or service outages for these businesses, such as social media, for example, experiencing some outage, some sort of social media like Twitter or something like that. And so there may also be increased news on Tuesday about various agreements or contracts. Negotiations on Tuesday may feel a little bit more tense because of some ego posturing of the leaders who are involved in those negotiations. So each of them may feel like they're the smarter one. They know best, what should happen, and they may be less likely to compromise because, again, each of them has an ego that they need to defend. For China, 13th and 14th of August may see possible announcements about some sort of new goals or vision for the country, and especially in the area of retail sales, social media, communication, transportation. So there may be some new projects announced that specifically have to do with these areas, such as communication or transportation, or some sort of a new service on a social media platform, or there may be news about some new contract or some agreement, especially again related to communication or transportation businesses. And those kind of announcements about these goals, visions, or new approaches, or new businesses even, or services may affect Chinese stock market, causing some additional volatility or increasing their trading volume. For the 14th, the Wednesday, I predict that the probability of market going down is about 60%, so not super high, but still down most likely. For Thursday, it's actually higher, it's about 65 to 70%, so it looks pretty bad, I guess, probably the worst day of the week as far as probability of market going down. And regardless of the direction, on the 15th we will most likely see strong market volatility with increased, with higher than usual swings or moves in the market. Like I said, most likely it will be down, but regardless of the direction, it will be a day of large moves, including, as I previously mentioned, in gold and or silver. And this may be due to some sort of emotional overreaction, so maybe based on feeling of sort of concerns about security. So something about security, assets, savings, feeling unprotected, or literally feeling kind of unsafe over like borders, for example, being violated of some country or countries. Also on the 15th, 16th of August, we may see increased news about retail sales, social media, yet again, contracts, agreements, communication, transportation businesses, and again, there may be some disruptions, including power or service outages, flight cancellations, abrupt changes in the status of some talks. So some agreements may fall through, or maybe suddenly they're being, initiated where previously there was no hope, and or there may be some surprises related to banks and financial institutions where they may come up with some reports that the numbers are maybe different than what were expected, or some decisions are made again by financial institutions that are different than what maybe was predicted. And finally, Friday, August 16th, I think will also be a down day, but this one I'll only give it about 55% chance for it going down, but pretty much the entire week looks down to me overall, so I'm not sure if it's a happy news, but again, one can make money, I guess, on whether the market is going up or down, depending on basically the strategy. So I hope it's going to be a wonderful and exciting week for you, and that you've enjoyed the videos and you will come back for more. You can also read some of these predictions at your own pace at my blog at plastunka.com. So have a great week, everyone. Talk to you later.